she's mekudeshet if there was dat, etc. But that's not the way you're supposed to do it. There's a bracha. What? The brachot are not ma'akev. If you eat matzah on Pesach and you don't make al chinat matzah, you makayim the mitzvah, right? But you're supposed to do it a certain way. Okay. So let's see here. So he says, if you say, my point is, if you say Birkat Erusin, Asher Kisham Tzivanu al Har'el, V'tilan Nasuot, etc., etc. If you say that needs asara, so it's not a and you're comparing it to Birkat Chatanim, so you're saying there's something here which is not Birkat HaMitzvah, right? If you're saying you need asara, you don't need asara to make al chilas matzah or al hanachat tefillin, right? Or laniach tefillin. Right? So the fact that you need 10 means that at least there's an element here. I'm being careful. There's an element here in the bracha which is not the Birkat HaMitzvah. Okay? So that's the furthest that we have machloket. Now let's see. This issue winds its way through a number of different problems. Let's see. So the Rosh says, "V'li nir'eh divrei Rav Achai," that you do need 10. Okay? And he says why. We're going to get into that. And he says, "V'yesh shekatvu." I skipped 2 lines. The first one line is shekatvu. Shetzarich levarech b'kat erusim kodem kiddushin. Okay? Kodem kiddushin. That's what we have in the Mechaber, right? V'achar kach, v'achar sheyigmor habracha yikadesh. Okay? And what's his proof? Kol habrachot kulan mirvarchim over la'asiyatan. Kol habrachot kulan is talking about Birkot HaMitzvah. Okay, so that's important. It means when he says over la'asiyatan, he's saying that it's a Birkat HaMitzvah. Kol habrachot kulan over la'asiyatan. You make the bracha, and then you do the mitzvah. Okay? Oh, 1 second. So he's going to talk about that. Hold on. 1 second. That's why I said it winds through the discussion. So let's see. Now, why? If I stopped here and I said doing an achad erusin, it means it's a birkat hashvach. No. Okay. Dil mahadra b'ha'isha. You don't want to do bracha levatala, right? You make a bracha. It's the joke with the brisker with the Kiddush Hashem. You know the joke? Everyone know the joke? No. Not everyone knows the joke. Okay, some brisker is walking in a bad neighborhood in wherever, Washington Heights. Pick your bad neighborhood, right? Baghdad. And they come and and somebody comes and wants it Shabbos. He wants his money, so he's giving you money. So he says, "I don't have money." He says, "I'm going to kill you." So he makes a bracha. Al Kiddush Hashem, and then he makes it with such kavana that he scares the mugger away. So he goes running after the mugger. Right? So we don't want it to be. That's like the oldest joke at the book. The oldest. Anyway, I guess in certain circles. Anyway, Robin Williams, all the time, never told that joke. Anyway, you could say. Anyway, yesh katusha. Shetzarich lasot achara erusin dil mahadra b'ha'isha. That would really be bad, right? V'havila bracha levatala. So here, you could have said, okay, let's talk about the question of over la'asiyatan. So if the simple analysis would be, over la'asiyatan, which is a Birkat HaMitzvah. If you don't require over la'asiyatan, it's because it's not a Birkat HaMitzvah. But that's not necessarily so. There's certain Birkat HaMitzvah that you do make afterwards. Tfilat ger, right? The ger makes it afterwards because he can't make the bracha before him because he's not Jewish. Right, so there, you under certain circumstances, you give up on over la'asiyatan as long as it's samuch. So then the bracha is bound to the action, even if it happens afterwards. So it still could be a birkat mitzvah, even though you do it afterwards if you have some extenuating circumstance. So here's an extenuating circumstance because never the girl has a mind of her own; she might change her mind, right? So you can't make the bracha beforehand, right? And the kevan she'ein maskirin asiyat mitzvah, ein tzarich levarech over la'asiyatan. I'm saying something else. Right now, I just continued reading. Right? Third line from the bottom. The assumption that he is not changing is that the bracha is a birkat mitzvah. What he's kicking back and forth is this halacha of over la'asiyatan. Okay? It's a birkat mitzvah, but does it have to be over la'asiyatan? Well, First reaction is yes. The second is no, maybe you should change your mind. And also, you know what? It doesn't have to be over l'asiyatan because the nusach of this bracha is not over l'asiyatan. So then you need over l'asiyatan, not because every birchas mitzvah has to be over l'asiyatan, is because you have to do what it says in the bracha. And when you say, Asher kisham sivanu al litatef batzitzit, so now I have to be mitatef b'tzitzit, because I said I'm going to be mitatef b'tzitzit, so I have to be mitatef b'tzitzit. But if I already put on the tzitzit, I'm making a bracha of something that I'm not doing now. So I have to, if the nusach of the bracha is over l'asiyatan, so the action has to be over l'asiyatan. But if the nusach of the bracha, for whatever other reason, is not over l'asiyatan, and in the birkat erusin, it's not. You're waiting for l'kadesh et ha'isha, right? Or la'ares, or something, right? So, but it's al ha'arayot, then you start talking about things. You get into this long Megillah. So the lashon of the bracha is not over l'asiyatan. So therefore, the action doesn't have to be over l'asiyatan. But the assumption still is that this bracha is a birkat mitzvah. And of course, let's not forget what we're talking about. Was that means that the action is a mitzvah, right? If you have a birkat mitzvah, it means what you're talking about is a mitzvah. Okay. All right. So that's okay.
So why do we need to do it on a cup of wine? Don't we only put cups of wine when we don't have action?
Well, Kiddush is an action. What do you mean? When it's just word?
I thought we are mechazek. I thought when we add to things that are only verbal, don't have.
So that's why with it's Medina de Gemara, you don't have to, right? So that's why it's nahagu. I think they just wanted it to be nicer, right? So let's make it nice. So they kosher bracha makes it nice. Okay, the Nagua Itna, so he says what the nose of the bracha is. Yesh makshim, this is what was bothering you, Rachel. The last line. Yesh makshim al nusach bracha zo, and now he's going to change his mind about everything. Why don't you say that? V'od echan matzinu bracha kazot, shemevarchim al masha asar lanu hakadosh baruch hu. Right? V'asar arusot. Right? V'halo einanu mevarchim she'asar lanu evim min achai v'hitil lanu l'shchot. Sorry. There's a discussion in Rishonim why man doesn't say Shechianu when he gets married. Because now they sort of solve the problem with the talus, whatever. Anyway, I don't like it, but because it actually underscores the fact that I can't say Shechianu. Because I'm marrying you, so I'm going to say Shechianu on the talus. I think it makes it worse, but that's my personal thing. It always drives me crazy. But so I think it's true. The Ritva. No, actually it's later. The Rav Pa'alim, right, from Baghdad. So he asks, why don't you say Shechianu when you get married? So his answer is Yoter Havalei Lishol Amai Eino Mevarech Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. So I just wanted to meet his wife, right? So here is an example. What? That's a tshuva. It's the beginning of the Rav Pa'alim. It's one of the first tshuva. Okay? He didn't know how many people would read it. Okay? Anyway, so he says, "V'alo ein anu mevarchim she'asar lanu evrim min achai v'hitil lanu l'shchot." Right? V'od ma'anyan laskir arayot bekan. V'od ma'lanu laskir chupa bekan. Right? Because kevan she'mevarchim bekat erusin bebeit erusin u'below chupa. Okay? So now he's changing everything. Until now, through this whole discussion of whether it is over l'asiyatan or it's not over l'asiyatan, he's still dealing with his birkat mitzvah, which has some funny nusach. Right? But now he's looking at the nusach and saying, what is this? What type of nusach is this? V'nirali ki bracha zo eina bracha l'asiyat mitzvah. He's being mechadish two things here. First of all, the bracha is not a birkat mitzvah, and secondly, there is no mitzvah. Ki pirya v'rivya hainu kiyuma mitzvah. V'im lakach pilegesh v'kiyen pirya v'rivya. So you can be makayim pirya v'rivya without kiddushin. Eino mechuyav l'kadesh isha. V'chein anosei zkena. Zkena means a woman who's too old to give birth, simply, right? Ailonit. O akara. Right? Etc. V'chein sris chama. The man can't have children. Shenasa mevarchim birkat chatanim. Ve'ein chiyuv b'mitzvah zo she'ein ba kiyum mitzvat pirya v'rivya. There's no Birkat HaMitzvah in Kiddushin, because Kiddushin is not a mitzvah. The mitzvah is Puravu. Now, if it was, now listen, so the mitzvah is Puravu, that means there is no independent mitzvah of Kiddushin. One, that's what he holds here, and this is like the Shiltot. And secondly, since there's no mitzvah, independent mitzvah of Kiddushin, so there's no Birkat HaMitzvah of Kiddushin. Now, he is saying something else here which is important. Lu Yitzuyar. Right? So he talks about Asalanu Evim min achai v'tilanu et hashachut. The only way to eat meat is to shecht. There's no other way to eat the meat. Okay? But there is, his point is, there is, like he's making an additional point here, there is another way to Mekayim Puravu. Pilegesh, or if you're over an Isser. A person is over an Isser and they have children. What? No. Let's stay within the context of the discussion. Okay? So a person can be over an Isser and have and be Mekayim Puravu. There's even a question in the Minchas Chinuch if a person is Mekayim Puravu by Holadat Mamzerim. Right? They're people, right? But on the other hand, it's Asur on the Lolo Kahal, so you're Mekayim Puravu or not. Okay? Mitzvah Baba Aveira, Okay? What? I think he says no. But in any case, it is possible to be Mekayim Puravu without getting married. And that's why there's no Birkat HaMitzvah here. Lu Yitzuyah, that the only way to be Mekayim Puravu was to get married, then there would be a Birkat HaMitzvah. Right? That's what's implicit here. And that brings you, that's where the comparison to Shechita is actually helpful. Right? Because in Shechita, the action, al panav, right? We're not running up Shechita now, but al panav, the action of Shechita, where I said before, has no ritualistic value beyond the fact that you want to eat meat, so you do it this way. The Torah sometimes the Torah can say something is a mitzvah, or the Rambam can count something in Binyan HaMitzvot, if it's what's called the din ba'alma. We saw that language. If it's just a category of law, whereas the Rambam has tumat tzarat as a mitzvah. Doesn't mean it's a mitzvah to become a tzara in order to bring the ofot and the log shemen, etc. It means this is a category of law. Right? Gerushin, presumably, aside from what you said, right? Presumably Gerushin is like that also. It's a category of law. So Kiddushin could be a category of law. No mitzvah. But it's counted as a mitzvah. It's a category of law. Right? So Shechita is also a category of law where the function of the action is merely, you have an Isser Evim min Achai, and you want to eat the meat. And the only way you can be matir the Isser Evim min Achai is to perform the prescribed action of killing the animal through Shechita. And that unravels the Isser Evim min Achai, or is matir the Isser Evim min Achai. And for that there's a mitzvah. And for that you make a bracha. Asher Kiddushin Tzivanu ala Shechita. You do make a bracha, even though the action is merely quote unquote a matir. If I don't want to eat meat, or if nobody else wants to eat meat, and nobody ever shechts, nothing lost. There's a category of law that wasn't relevant, and we never applied it. So what? Okay, so he's willing to say that if Lu Yitzuyar, that the only way to be Mekayim Puravu was to get married, then getting married, then Kiddushin would be the matir in order to have bia, which is necessary to Mekayim Puravu. And for that, there would be a Birkat HaMitzvah. Okay? So this also conveys a possibility. And why is there no such Birkat HaMitzvah? There is no such Birkat HaMitzvah, not because Kiddushin is not necessarily a mitzvah to be counted in Minyan HaMitzvot. It could be. It would be like Shechita. Except there's a difference between Shechita and Kiddushin, that in the case of Shechita, the only way to eat the meat, to be matir the meat, is by doing this action. So the action has a certain status which justifies a bracha. Whereas in Kiddushin, it's a category of law to be counted, but there's no Birkat HaMitzvah, because you can be mekayem the goal of the action without actually doing this action. You can get around it. So since you can get around it, they weren't metakein. They don't metakein a bracha. Okay? So this goes back to different ways of understanding what the mitzvah is. Okay? So to summarize, what we have is as follows. The Rambam counts Kiddushin as a mitzvah. It's also counted as a mitzvah. We see that the Shir also says mitzvah leminsav. Right? It's a mitzvah to get married. Right? The question is, when we say something is a mitzvah, what do we mean by that? Okay? So, minimally speaking, a mitzvah is a category of law without any nuance of kiyum mitzvah attributed to it. There's no religious value. It's hard to talk about this way, but there isn't a religious value in doing it. It's just a category of law, just like there's no religious value to be shochet if you don't want to eat meat, so you don't have to be shochet. Okay? So the minimum thing is that it's simply a category of law. Okay? Another, if we want to make it more than that, right, is that there is some sort of religious meaning to be mekayim it, and that would be starting from comparing it to the mitzvah of tzitzit that we saw in the Rivash. As the Rivash says further, that it actually creates the environment of quote-unquote Kedushat Zivugim b'Yisrael. Right? So you want to create this exclusive environment between them, or Minat Torah, it's exclusive, at least in one direction. Right? There's an Isur Eshet Ish, right? There's the responsibilities that the man has towards his wife. That framework is the framework for Kedushat HaZivug b'Yisrael, and the mitzvah is to create that. Okay? Another possibility is to look at the mitzvah of Kiddushin as being merely instrumental. It has no value in and of itself. The mitzvah of Kiddushin is in order to be Mekayim Pururuvu. Okay? And there may be other ways it can be Mekayim Pururuvu, but this is the most convenient way to be Mekayim Pururuvu. If you try to be Mekayim Pururuvu through Pilegesh, is very unaesthetic. Being Mekayim Pururuvu in other ways could downright be asur, right? So the only way to be Mekayim it in a nice, festive way, and a way which is mutter, is through Kiddushin, and that's the mitzvah. But it doesn't have mitzvah in and of itself. Mitzvah is a prerequisite for being Mekayim Pururuvu. Okay? Now, whether it's a mitzvah or not, there's very simple ramifications in terms of the bracha. Okay? Whether the bracha needs 10 or not. Right? Certainly, if it needs 10, we're not talking as a birkat mitzvah. If it doesn't need 10, then you're still open. Like you still don't know that it's a birkat mitzvah. It could still be a birkat shvach. The question of over la'asiyatan. If we require over la'asiyatan, it's because we're treating Kiddushin as a mitzvah. If we don't, it's still open, because it could be, there's the technical reasons why we don't require over la'asiyatan, because the woman can change her mind. Or what was the other reason? Because the language of the bracha is not over l'asiyatan, so that's why it's not over l'asiyatan. That's why maybe we don't need over l'asiyatan.
But even if it's a mitzvah, even if it's just merely a category of law, it would still be a mitzvah.
Correct. Then you would still need over l'asiyatan, just like shchita, right?
This question is clearly very relevant for modern day if we wanted to find an alternate.
Okay, so hold on. Okay, so all right. So if you the bracha. Okay, let's talk about the bracha for a second. Hold on. That has to do with understanding how Pilegesh, and that after the Chagim, I said. Okay. So he says in the Mechaber it says, right? Chi kadesh. What is it? Yivarech v'acharkach. Once I lost the place here. Okay? Now, then he says, V'im lo birech birkat erusin b'sha'a shekidesh. The Mechaber says, Lo yivarech ota b'sha'at nisuin. You don't make the bracha. In Yiddish you say farfal. Right? You're supposed to make the bracha, you didn't make the bracha, it's too late. So the Rambam, this is taken from the Rambam in Perek Gimel, says, it's the end of Perek Gimel, 1 second. Perek Gimel Chav Gimel. Kol mekadesh isha. Perek Gimel, Halacha Chav Gimel. No, sorry. Okay. Kol mekadesh isha, bein al yidei atzmo, bein al yidei shaliach. Tzarich levarech kodam ha-kiddushin, over l'asiyatam, kodam ha-kiddushin, hu o shlucho, v'achar kach mikadesh, k'derech shemevarchim kodem kol ha-mitzvot. Okay, after you go through the sugya, the Rambam's lashon is mamash zahav. Okay? Kamo kederech shemevarchim kodem kol hamitzvot. And now what comes out of that is v'im kidesh lo birech lo yivarech achar kiddushin shezo bracha levatala ma shena'asa kvar na'asa. Okay, but in the Ramah, after the Mechaber said, passing like the Rambam, v'yesh omrim demevarchim ota b'shat hanisuin. So you didn't make the bracha b'shat kiddushin. So this gefrelach, you make the bracha b'shat hanisuin, right? V'chein noagim. Right? Afilu kidesh isha mizman aroch mivarchim bekat erusim tachat achupa. Like that. They did erusim last year. Now it's time for nisuin. You make the bekat erusim nachamu. Right? V'yeshum in the chozer mekadesh ota tachat achupa to do Kiddushin again. Kidesh yu Kiddushin smuchim lebracha. It's the other way around. Instead of talking about the bracha, Kiddushin, of course the bracha becomes the ikar. Right? So obviously the Ramah is looking like the way the Rosh looked at it, as a Birkat HaShvach. Right? According to the Rambam leaves no room for doubt. Kederech shemevarchim kodem kol hamitzvot. So there's only over la'asiyatan. He's not concerned about the woman going back on it, samuch, like the last minute. And if she does, that's the least of your problems, right? So it's a birkat mitzvah over la'asiyatan. What happens if you don't do the bracha? So that's the Mechaber and Ramah. The Ramah says, Fafal, you did the mitzvah, you didn't do the bracha. Very nice to do the mitzvah, but you didn't do the bracha. But if the bracha is birkat hashvach, it could be l'chatchila you want it beforehand to initiate the shvach, but if you have it afterwards, it's also okay. It's the same ma'amah. Okay? So next week we'll talk about the content. This will be the hardest we'll talk about. What the nature of the kinyan is. Okay? What you've been waiting for.
You're so lucky that I'm not